Welcome to Unknown Suspect, where every shadow hides a secret and every story leads to a truth you didn't see coming. Chapter 1. An Unwelcome Invitation. Hercule Poirot valued order above all things. Order in thought, order in behavior, and most certainly order in his surroundings. Thus, when the letter arrived at his flat in Whitehaven Mansions, bearing an uneven stamp and an ink blot upon the address, Poirot felt a momentary flicker of displeasure before curiosity took its place. The sender was Sir Alistair Fenton. Poirot read the letter twice, slowly, his neat moustaches twitching almost imperceptibly. Sir Alistair was known in business circles as a powerful industrialist, a man of careful habits and considerable wealth. Yet the letter itself was oddly restrained, almost anxious in tone. "I fear," it read, "that I am being deceived by someone within my own household. Matters of trust, Monsieur Poirot, are no small thing to a man of my age. I beg you to come at once." Poirot disliked haste. Nevertheless, the words "within my own household" stirred his professional instincts. He rang for his valet and began to pack with precise efficiency. 2 hours later, Poirot sat comfortably in a first-class carriage bound for Surrey, his thoughts already arranging themselves like pieces of a well-designed puzzle. If Sir Alistair was correct, the danger did not come from an outsider, but from familiarity, a far more subtle and dangerous source. Windermere Court revealed itself gradually through tall trees and carefully trimmed hedges. It was an impressive house built of pale stone, standing with quiet confidence rather than show. Poirot approved of its symmetry, though he noticed that one of the front windows was slightly ajar, disturbing the balance. Sir Alistair greeted him in the entrance hall. He was a tall man, thin and greying, with eyes that darted nervously despite his composed posture. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot," he said, forcing a smile. "I am grateful you came so promptly." Poirot inclined his head. When a gentleman fears betrayal, it is wise not to delay. Sir Alistair led him inside. The household, Poirot soon learned, consisted of 5 people. Lady Lydia Fenton, Sir Alistair's second wife, was elegant and considerably younger than her husband. Marcus Fenton, his son from his first marriage, was a man of 28, with an air of quiet resentment. Eleanor Briggs, the secretary, was efficient and pale, with sharp eyes that rarely rested. Finally, there was Harold Vane, Sir Alistair's long-time business partner, genial and smooth-spoken. Introductions were polite, though Poirot noted something beneath the surface. A pause too long before a handshake. A glance quickly averted. A smile that failed to reach the eyes. Tea was served in the drawing-room. Poirot observed carefully, while saying little. Lady Lydia poured with graceful hands. Marcus sat apart, staring out of the window. Eleanor kept her posture rigid, as if afraid to relax. Vane spoke easily, filling silences with unnecessary detail. When the servants withdrew, Sir Alistair cleared his throat. "I believe someone here is stealing from me," he said quietly. "Company funds, large sums. I have not confronted anyone yet, but I feel watched." Poirot leaned forward slightly. "And you invited me to observe, yes? Quietly?" Sir Alistair nodded. "I wished to avoid scandal." Poirot's gaze moved gently from face to face. No one spoke. The silence itself became revealing. Dinner that evening was a formal affair. Sir Alistair appeared strained, barely touching his food. Poirot noticed him glance repeatedly at his wineglass before pushing it aside. Marcus drank too quickly. Lady Lydia ate very little. Eleanor barely spoke. Vane alone appeared relaxed. After dinner, Sir Alistair excused himself, saying he had correspondence to attend to. He retired to his study. One by one, the others dispersed. Poirot remained in the drawing room, pretending to read while listening. At exactly 9 o'clock, he heard footsteps in the corridor. At 9:10, a door closed softly. Time, Poirot reflected, was often the most neglected witness. At 9:15, a sharp cry echoed through the house. Poirot rose immediately. Servants ran. The study door stood open. Sir Alistair lay slumped over his desk, his body unnaturally still. A glass lay shattered on the carpet. Papers were scattered, though the desk itself was strangely neat. Lady Lydia gasped. Marcus froze. Eleanor covered her mouth. Vane murmured something about calling the doctor. Poirot stepped forward calmly, his eyes already at work. This, he knew, was no simple death, and whatever secrets Windermere Court concealed, they had just demanded his full attention. Chapter 2. The Silent Study. The study at Windermere Court possessed an atmosphere of deliberate restraint, as though even in death Sir Alistair Fenton insisted upon order. The heavy curtains were drawn halfway, allowing the last light of evening to stretch weakly across the carpet. Bookshelves lined the walls, immaculate and carefully dusted. The desk, broad and polished, stood at the centre like a command post abandoned too suddenly. Sir Alistair's body remained slumped forward, one arm hanging limply at his side. The shattered glass lay several feet away, its fragments glittering faintly. No blood stained the room, no sign of violence disturbed the calm. Poirot took this in at once. The doctor arrived swiftly and performed a brief examination. "Death appears to have been sudden," he said. "Possibly a seizure or cardiac event. I will not be certain until further tests." "A natural death, then?" asked Harold Vane, his voice steady. The doctor hesitated. "It would be premature to say so." Poirot nodded, satisfied with the caution. Too many cases, he knew, were decided far too quickly. The household was dismissed, though Poirot requested that no one leave the premises. Sir Alistair's body was respectfully covered and removed, and the study door was closed once more. Poirot asked for a few moments alone. Inside he moved slowly, almost ceremoniously. His hands remained behind his back. He did not touch, he did not rush. First, the desk. Papers lay scattered, yet Poirot noticed they had been arranged deliberately rather than flung in panic. A blotter sat neatly aligned. An ink pen rested exactly parallel to the desk's edge. Only one thing appeared disturbed, a single sheet of paper in the fireplace, partially burned, its edges blackened. Poirot leaned closer. Only a few words remained visible, though incomplete. Enough to suggest the letter had been intentionally destroyed. Poirot straightened and examined the glass. It had contained wine. The smell was faint, but something lingered beneath it, sharp, bitter, unpleasant. Poirot inhaled carefully, then stepped back. "Interesting," he murmured. He noticed Sir Alistair's watch next. It rested face down on the desk, stopped at 10 minutes past 9. Poirot lifted an eyebrow. A man careful with time rarely removed his watch without reason. Poirot glanced around the room. The fire had been recently stirred. The poker leaned against the hearth, its handle warm to the touch. Too warm. The study, Poirot concluded, had been tidied after the event, or staged before it. When Poirot rejoined the others in the drawing room, the atmosphere had shifted. Shock had begun to harden into suspicion. Lady Lydia sat rigidly, her face pale but composed. Marcus stood near the window, his fists clenched. Eleanor Briggs hovered close to the mantelpiece, eyes darting nervously. Vane poured himself a brandy, though he drank only a sip. Poirot spoke gently. "You will forgive me if I ask a few questions. It is important that we establish the facts clearly." No one objected. "When did you last see Sir Alistair alive?" Poirot asked. Lady Lydia spoke first. Just after dinner, he complained of a headache and said he wished to work. Marcus frowned. I saw him earlier in the afternoon. He seemed agitated. Eleanor swallowed. I gave him some letters to sign at around 8:30. Vane nodded. I left shortly after dinner. I had business in the village. Poirot nodded in return, though he did not comment. And between 9 and the discovery of the body, Poirot continued. I was in my room, Lydia said promptly. I retired early. Marcus shifted. I went for a walk. I needed air. Eleanor hesitated. I was working, typing correspondence. Vane lifted his glass slightly. As I said, I was out. Poirot thanked them and dismissed the group, requesting they remain available. Later that night, Poirot sat alone in the small guest room prepared for him. He arranged his thoughts carefully. No sign of forced entry, no clear struggle, no obvious poison, yet the smell lingered. The letter burned, the watch turned over. Poirot considered human behaviour. Sir Alistair had been frightened before his death. Of that Poirot felt certain. Fear could kill a man as surely as poison, and fear, Poirot reflected, was most effective when it came from someone trusted. He rose and adjusted the curtains, ensuring they fell evenly on both sides. At Windermere Court, balance had been disturbed, and Poirot intended to restore it, piece by careful piece. Chapter 3. Fractured Loyalties. Morning light crept cautiously into Windermere Court, as though even the day itself were uncertain how to behave after the events of the previous night. Breakfast was served in the dining room, but the usual formality had collapsed into something strained and uncomfortable. The clink of cutlery sounded unnaturally loud. No one spoke unless necessary. Hercule Poirot entered last, immaculate as ever, his presence quietly commanding attention. He greeted the household with courteous nods and seated himself where he could observe everyone without appearing to do so. Lady Lydia Fenton sat at the head of the table. She wore black, tasteful and restrained, her hair perfectly arranged. Her expression suggested sorrow, yet her posture remained composed. Poirot noticed that her hands, resting lightly beside her plate, did not tremble. Marcus Fenton arrived late. His eyes were shadowed, his manner defensive. He avoided looking at his stepmother and poured himself coffee with unnecessary force. Eleanor Briggs sat stiffly, her back straight, her gaze fixed on her plate. She ate very little. Harold Vane, by contrast, attempted conversation, commenting on the weather and the inconvenience of delays to business affairs. His cheerfulness seemed oddly misplaced. Poirot listened. After breakfast, Poirot requested a private word with Marcus. They walked slowly along the gravel path bordering the gardens. The air was crisp, the ground dry. You argued with your father, Poirot said gently. Marcus stiffened. Who told you that? No one, Poirot replied. Your manner tells me. Marcus exhaled sharply. Yes, about money. He controlled everything. I wanted independence. Did you threaten him? Marcus hesitated. I said things I regret. Poirot nodded sympathetically. Anger speaks loudly, but not always truthfully. As they walked, Poirot glanced at Marcus's shoes. There was mud on the soles, dark, damp, and fresh. Poirot's eyes flicked briefly to the path beneath their feet. It was dry and compacted. Interesting. Poirot later spoke with Eleanor Briggs in the small office adjoining the study. She sat rigidly, her hands clasped together. You managed Sir Alistair's correspondence and accounts, Poirot said. Yes, Monsieur Poirot. You were trusted. Her lips tightened. I tried to be worthy of it. Poirot noticed the phrasing. Tried. Did Sir Alistair seem troubled recently? Yes, he was anxious. He suspected dishonesty. "And you?" Poirot asked quietly. Eleanor met his gaze for the first time. "I was afraid." Poirot did not press further. Fear, he knew, could lead to many things, but rarely to calm execution. In the drawing room, Poirot found Lady Lydia standing by the window. She watched the gardens without really seeing them. "You loved your husband?" Poirot asked softly. "Yes," she replied at once. "Despite what others think." Poirot studied her reflection in the glass. "And did Sir Alistair trust you?" "Entirely," she said, "which is why this is unbearable." Poirot noticed something else. Lydia's eyes flicked briefly towards the study door before returning to the view outside. Finally, Poirot sought Harold Vane in the library. Vane was examining business papers, calm and focused. "You left the house last night," Poirot said. "Yes, I drove to the village." "Anyone see you?" Vane smiled. "The innkeeper." Poirot smiled back, though his eyes remained thoughtful. Throughout the day, Poirot wandered the house, apparently idle, yet always attentive. He observed servants whispering. He noticed Eleanor avoiding the study. He saw Marcus pacing the gardens repeatedly. He watched Lydia burn a letter in her bedroom fireplace, though its contents were already ash. By evening, the atmosphere had thickened further. Each person had something to hide, something to fear, something to lose. Poirot retired to his room and reviewed the facts. Sir Alistair suspected theft. The accounts were altered, but cleverly. Marcus was angry, but careless. Eleanor was frightened and tense. Lydia was composed, perhaps too composed. Vane was smooth, reasonable, and curiously untouched by grief. Poirot adjusted his moustaches. "When everyone appears guilty," he murmured, "it is often because the truth is standing very still." Outside, Windermere Court settled into uneasy silence, and beneath that silence, loyalties continued to fracture. Chapter 4: A Misleading Trail. The following morning brought with it a change in atmosphere at Windermere Court. The initial shock had begun to give way to something sharper: accusation. Servants whispered openly now, doors closed more firmly than before. Every glance seemed weighted with unspoken judgment. Hercule Poirot observed these developments with professional interest. Fear, he knew, sharpened the mind, but it also encouraged mistakes. Shortly after breakfast, Inspector Collins from the local constabulary arrived. He was a capable man, though inclined towards direct conclusions. Poirot greeted him warmly, grateful for the presence of official procedure. "The son looks promising as a suspect," Collins remarked quietly as they walked through the hall. "Quarrel, money trouble, opportunity." Poirot smiled politely. "Yes, very promising." They began with Marcus Fenton. Marcus sat stiffly in the study, his jaw set. Inspector Collins asked his questions briskly. "You admit to arguing with your father?" "Yes." "You were seen near the study shortly before his death?" "Yes." "And you left the house immediately after?" "I went for a walk." Poirot leaned forward. "Which path did you take, Monsieur Marcus?" "The south path, through the trees." Poirot nodded. "And it was muddy?" Marcus blinked. Yes, near the brook." Poirot glanced at Collins, then said nothing more. Later, Poirot asked to see Marcus's coat and shoes. They bore traces of mud, dark and thick. To Collins, this was confirmation. "The brook area is wet," Collins said. "Matches his story." "Indeed," Poirot replied mildly. That afternoon, Poirot walked the grounds alone. He examined the south path. The earth was damp near the brook, but not churned. No recent footprints disturbed its surface. Poirot crouched briefly, touching the soil with the tip of his finger. Not fresh. Returning to the house, Poirot found Eleanor Briggs in distress. She had been questioned by the inspector and was visibly shaken. "I think it was Marcus," she whispered. "Do you?" Poirot asked gently. She shook her head. "He's angry, but not cruel." Poirot nodded. Cruelty and anger were not the same thing. In the early evening, Collins informed Poirot that Marcus would be detained for further questioning. Lady Lydia protested weakly. Vane remained silent. Poirot watched Marcus being led away. Marcus did not resist. His expression was bitter but also bewildered. That night, Poirot returned to the study alone. The room had been sealed, yet its secrets still lingered. He examined the fireplace again. A thin line of ash had been disturbed since his last visit. Someone had been there. Poirot noticed a small fragment of paper beneath the grate, missed, perhaps, in haste. He did not read it fully. Not yet. Poirot then examined the desk once more. The watch lay where it had been returned after inspection, face up now. Poirot frowned slightly and turned it face down again. "Time," he murmured, "is only useful when it tells the truth." As Poirot left the study, he passed Harold Vane in the corridor. "Dreadful business," Vane said. "Young men these days are so volatile." Poirot looked at him thoughtfully. "Yes, volatility draws the eye." "And hides other things?" Vane asked lightly. Poirot smiled. "Sometimes." Late that night, Poirot sat in his room, assembling the misleading trail piece by piece. Marcus had motive. Marcus had opportunity. Marcus had evidence. Muddy shoes, proximity, anger. Too neat. The false trail, Poirot said softly, is designed to satisfy impatience. Somewhere in Windermere Court, someone was very patient indeed, and Poirot intended to reward that patience with exposure. Chapter 5. The absence of poison. The arrival of the medical report altered the direction of the inquiry with unsettling force. Inspector Collins received it mid-morning and read it twice before offering it to Hercule Poirot, his expression troubled. "No toxins," Collins said. "No trace of poison in the blood or stomach. The heart failed, suddenly." Poirot accepted the paper and scanned it with measured attention. His eyes paused briefly on a single sentence before he folded the report and returned it. "Sudden deaths," Poirot observed, "rarely arrive without an invitation." Collins frowned. "You believe he was frightened into it?" "I believe," Poirot replied, "that fear can be administered as carefully as any substance." The study, reopened under supervision, felt altered in daylight. Sunlight revealed faint inconsistencies invisible the night before. The glass fragments, though collected, had left impressions in the carpet, too evenly spread. Someone had broken the glass deliberately, not dropped it in shock. Poirot moved to the desk. Sir Alistair's papers had been catalogued, yet Poirot noticed faint impressions on the blotter beneath. He tilted it toward the light. Indentations revealed hurried writing removed before it could be read. Inspector Collins followed his gaze. He was writing something important. Or reading something important, Poirot corrected gently. Poirot requested access to the financial records. Eleanor Briggs produced them with trembling hands. She had worked late into the night arranging them, perhaps hoping structure might restore her sense of control. Poirot leafed through the pages slowly. Figures marched neatly across columns, precise and convincing. And yet there was something subtly wrong. Totals that should have balanced did so only because other numbers had been quietly adjusted. This was not careless theft. It was clever and deliberate. "Someone here understands finance well," Poirot said. Eleanor flinched. Later, Poirot examined the fireplace once more. The fragment he had noticed the previous night revealed a few letters, too few for certainty, but enough to suggest accusation rather than apology. Whatever had been written was not meant to be answered. It was meant to provoke. As the afternoon progressed, Poirot requested a reconstruction of the evening's movements. One by one, the household repeated their accounts. The words matched earlier statements, yet the tones had shifted. Confidence replaced shock. Relief replaced grief. Someone believed the danger had passed. Poirot did not share that belief. He asked Eleanor to demonstrate her typing work from that night. She hesitated, then led him to her office. The typewriter sat ready. Poirot examined the ribbon carefully. "This ribbon has not been used recently," Poirot said. Eleanor's shoulders slumped. "I could not concentrate. I only sat there." A lie told from fear, Poirot thought, not design. That evening, Poirot walked through the house once more, guided not by logic, but by instinct. He paused outside Lady Lydia's room and noticed the scent of smoke. The fireplace had been cleaned thoroughly. Too thoroughly. In the library, Harold Vane sat reading. He appeared relaxed, almost relieved. "A natural death, it seems," Vane said casually. Poirot regarded him. Natural outcomes often require careful preparation. Vane smiled thinly. Later, Inspector Collins informed Poirot that Marcus had been released temporarily. The evidence against him no longer held weight. "Then our murderer will be uneasy tonight," Poirot said quietly. In his room, Poirot arranged the facts anew. No poison, no violence, no struggle. Yet fear had been applied with precision. The glass, the scent, the letter, the altered timepiece, all pointed toward illusion rather than force. This was a performance, Poirot murmured, and like all performances, it required rehearsal. The absence of poison was not an obstacle. It was the clue. Chapter 6. The Broken Confession. By the 6th day at Windermere Court, tension no longer simmered quietly. It pressed upon the house like a held breath. Every conversation ended too abruptly. Every footstep seemed louder than necessary. Hercule Poirot sensed the change with satisfaction. When pressure increased, truth had a habit of surfacing. That morning, Eleanor Briggs asked to speak with him privately. They met in the small morning room overlooking the rose garden. Eleanor sat rigidly at first, her hands clenched together, her face pale but resolute. "I cannot endure this any longer," she said. "I must tell you what I have done." Poirot waited. Silence, he knew, was often the greatest encouragement. "I altered the accounts," Eleanor continued. "Small amounts at first. I convinced myself it was temporary. Sir Alistair trusted me completely, and I betrayed that trust." Poirot nodded, his expression sympathetic rather than accusatory. "Did Sir Alistair confront you?" he asked. "Yes, not directly. He left a note on my desk asking me to see him that evening. He knew I was certain of it." "And when you did not go?" "I was afraid. I stayed in my office pretending to work." Poirot studied her carefully. Her shame was genuine, her distress unfeigned. "You did not kill him, mademoiselle," Poirot said calmly. Eleanor looked up sharply. "How can you be sure?" "Because your crime required secrecy, not attention. Death brings questions. You would never invite them." Eleanor broke down then, relief overtaking fear. Poirot allowed the moment to pass before excusing her gently. Later that day, Poirot requested access to Sir Alistair's personal effects. Among them was a medical file, old but revealing. Sir Alistair had suffered from a rare heart condition, one aggravated by sudden emotional shock. The warning from his physician was clear: extreme stress could be fatal. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Voila. The method was now unmistakable. Poirot returned to the study and examined the desk once more. He noticed something previously overlooked, a faint scratch along the wood's edge, as though something sharp had been dragged across it. A penknife, perhaps, or a letter opener. He imagined the scene not as a struggle, but as a moment of stillness. Sir Alistair seated, reading, understanding too late. That evening, Poirot invited Lady Lydia to walk with him through the gardens. The air was cool, the sky heavy with clouds. "You were fond of your husband?" Poirot said conversationally. "Yes," she replied. "He gave me stability." "Did he ever confide in you his fears?" She hesitated. "He said someone close to him was dishonest." "And you?" Poirot asked gently. "Were you ever afraid of him?" "No," Lydia replied firmly. "But I believe he was afraid of being made ridiculous." Poirot smiled faintly. For some men, that is the greatest fear of all. As they returned to the house, Poirot noticed Harold Vane watching them from the doorway. His gaze lingered a moment too long. That night, Poirot examined the fragment recovered from the fireplace. Combined with the indentation marks on the blotter, it revealed its purpose: a letter designed to accuse, to threaten, and above all, to terrify. Not a confession, a weapon. Poirot gathered everyone in the drawing room, briefly announcing no conclusions, only observations. "The death of Sir Alistair was not caused by poison," he said, "nor by violence. It was caused by knowledge, delivered at exactly the wrong moment." He watched their faces closely. Marcus looked confused. Eleanor looked relieved. Lady Lydia appeared thoughtful. Harold Vane did not blink. Later, Poirot sat alone, reviewing the final pieces: the forged letter, the staged glass, the manipulated scent, the careful adjustment of the watch. Only one person possessed motive, opportunity, financial understanding, and emotional distance sufficient to plan such an act. "One more push," Poirot murmured, "and the truth will fall into place." Outside, thunder rolled faintly across the countryside. Windermere Court was approaching its reckoning. Chapter 7. The Real Game. By the 7th day, Windermere Court no longer pretended to be a place of mourning. It had become a field of quiet hostility, where each person measured every word and gesture with care. The polite facade remained, but it was thin now, stretched tight over suspicion and fear. Hercule Poirot felt the change acutely. The truth, he knew, was no longer concealed by cleverness, only by timing. Poirot began the day with Inspector Collins walking slowly through the house as servants went about their duties in uneasy silence. "You see, Inspector," Poirot said, "there comes a moment when evidence ceases to be physical and becomes behavioral. That moment has arrived." Collins nodded. "I'm listening." Poirot asked that each member of the household be questioned once more, not aggressively, but conversationally. He wished to observe not what they said, but how they responded to pressure that was no longer hidden. Marcus Fenton was first. He answered plainly, even impatiently, repeating his account without embellishment. There was bitterness in his voice, but no calculation. Poirot dismissed him quickly. Eleanor Briggs followed. She was subdued, her earlier confession having drained her of resistance. She answered honestly, sometimes painfully so, correcting herself when uncertain, rather than insisting on certainty. Poirot thanked her and let her go. Lady Lydia spoke with calm restraint. She expressed grief without drama, and when Poirot asked about Sir Alistair's fears, she admitted that he had seemed increasingly anxious in the days before his death. "He said someone close wished to destroy him," she said quietly. "I thought he was exaggerating." Poirot noted her choice of words. Destroy, not steal. Finally, Harold Vane entered the room. He appeared relaxed, even faintly amused by the process, as though confident the matter was drawing to a close. "You have been most cooperative, Monsieur Vane," Poirot said pleasantly. "But there are still a few curiosities." "Oh?" Vane replied lightly. "Such as?" Poirot did not answer at once. Instead, he invited Vane to walk with him through the grounds. Collins followed at a discreet distance. "You told us you went to the village on the night of Sir Alistair's death," Poirot said. "Yes." "You drove?" "At first, yes. But later you suggested you walked." Vane shrugged. "I may have been mistaken." Poirot stopped and turned to face him. "Mistakes are understandable. Patterns are not." Vane's smile tightened. "Your car tires," Poirot continued, "show no evidence of travel that evening, yet your shoes were clean, too clean for a walk on country roads." Vane laughed softly. "Surely this proves nothing?" "Alone, no," Poirot agreed. "But combined with other things, They returned indoors. In the study, Poirot gestured toward the desk. "Sir Alistair kept a letter opener here," Poirot said. "It is missing." "So?" Vane replied. "So it was used," Poirot said gently, "to open a letter meant to be read in private, a letter that did not belong to Sir Alistair's correspondence." Poirot turned to Collins. The fragment from the fireplace contained no signature. It was anonymous, and yet its tone was intimate, written by someone who knew Sir Alistair's fears very well. That afternoon, Poirot arranged a small but deliberate test. Eleanor Briggs was asked to prepare a revised financial summary for Harold Vane's review. She did so carefully, including a minor numerical inconsistency. Vane glanced at the page. "That total is incorrect," he said at once. "It should be lower." Poirot's eyes sharpened. "You noticed immediately," Poirot said. "I am a businessman." "Yes," Poirot replied, "and also someone who altered figures without detection." Vane said nothing. As evening approached, Poirot requested that everyone gather in the drawing room. The mood was heavy, expectant. Rain tapped steadily against the windows. Poirot stood before the fireplace, his posture relaxed, his voice calm. "Sir Alistair Fenton did not die by poison," he said, "nor was he struck down in anger. He died because someone delivered him a carefully prepared shock, knowing it would be fatal." Marcus stared. Eleanor closed her eyes. Lydia leaned forward slightly. "This required knowledge," Poirot continued, "of Sir Alistair's health, of his finances, of his fears, and it required patience." Poirot turned slowly until he faced Harold Vane. "The staged evidence was not meant to withstand scrutiny," Poirot said. "It was meant to distract, to direct suspicion toward the emotional, the careless, the frightened." Vane rose abruptly. "This is speculation." Poirot met his gaze without hostility. "Perhaps, but speculation becomes truth when all alternatives fail." Inspector Collins stepped forward. The room fell silent. The game, Poirot knew, was no longer hidden. Only the final move remained. Chapter 8. Poirot arranges the truth. Rain continued to fall against the tall windows of the drawing room, steady and deliberate, as though nature itself wished to impose order upon the turmoil inside Windermere Court. The household remained gathered where Hercule Poirot had left them, each person seated or standing with strained patience. No one spoke. All eyes rested upon the small Belgian detective. Poirot stood with his back to the fireplace, hands clasped lightly before him. He appeared calm, almost serene, yet his eyes were bright with purpose. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began softly, "we have reached the moment where confusion must give way to clarity. I ask only that you listen, not with fear, but with reason." Inspector Collins positioned himself discreetly near the door. Poirot turned first to Marcus Fenton. "You were an excellent distraction, monsieur. Your anger, your muddy shoes, your argument with your father, these things cried out to be noticed." Marcus stiffened. "You let them think it was me." "I allowed the obvious to speak," Poirot replied gently. The obvious is often the enemy of truth. Poirot then inclined his head toward Eleanor Briggs. Your crime was real, mademoiselle, but incomplete. Theft? Yes. Murder? No. You lacked the motive to silence Sir Alistair permanently. You feared exposure, but you hoped for forgiveness. Eleanor nodded, tears forming, but said nothing. Poirot finally faced Lady Lydia. You loved your husband, he said. But love alone does not make one capable of such cold design. You were shocked by his death, not relieved. Lydia's voice was steady. Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. Poirot turned at last to Harold Vane. Monsieur Vane, Poirot said calmly, you were Sir Alistair's partner, his equal in business, and eventually his rival. Vane folded his arms. You have no proof. Poirot smiled faintly. Let us arrange the facts. He stepped forward slightly. You knew of Sir Alistair's heart condition. You had discussed it with him years ago when he first considered retirement. You also knew he was deeply afraid of scandal, of being ruined not by failure, but by betrayal. Vane's expression hardened. You discovered Eleanor's alterations in the accounts, Poirot continued. Rather than expose her, you used her work as a model. You altered figures more skillfully on a larger scale. When Sir Alistair noticed irregularities, you ensured his suspicion would fall elsewhere. Poirot gestured toward the study. You forged a letter, anonymous, personal, cruel. It suggested that his young wife intended to poison him, that she mocked his weakness, that his household was conspiring against him. You ensured it arrived when he was alone, already anxious. Lady Lydia gasped softly. The glass, Poirot went on, was broken deliberately. The bitter scent was introduced to suggest poison. The watch was turned face down to confuse the time. And the letter opener, used to open the forged note, was removed because it carried traces of your handling. Poirot's voice remained even, but each word struck with precision. You did not touch Sir Alistair, Poirot said. You frightened him. You applied pressure at exactly the right moment. His heart did the rest. Vane laughed sharply. This is a theory. Poirot inclined his head. Then allow me to complete it. He turned to Inspector Collins. Monsieur Vane's alibi changed twice. His car did not leave the drive. His shoes were too clean. He corrected financial errors instinctively, errors only the person who altered them would notice. Poirot stepped closer to Vane now. And finally, he said quietly, when I announced that Sir Alistair died of shock, not poison, you showed relief, not confusion, relief. The room was utterly silent. Vane's composure cracked. His smile vanished, replaced by something sharp and bitter. You clever little man, he said coldly. Yes, I planned it. Every detail. He was going to ruin me. I merely acted first. Inspector Collins moved forward immediately. Harold Vane, you are under arrest. Vane did not resist as he was led away. He did not look back. When the door closed, the tension in the room collapsed like a released breath. Eleanor wept openly. Marcus sat heavily in a chair. Lady Lydia pressed a hand to her mouth. Poirot waited, allowing calm to return. Later that evening, Poirot prepared to depart. Inspector Collins thanked him sincerely. Eleanor's confession was formally recorded, her cooperation taken into account. Marcus apologized quietly for his suspicions. Lady Lydia expressed her gratitude with dignity. As Poirot stood in the entrance hall adjusting his gloves, Lydia spoke once more. You have given us truth, Monsieur Poirot, she said, even though it was painful. Poirot smiled kindly. Madame, the truth is like order. Without it, nothing stands properly. Outside, the rain had stopped. The grounds of Windermere Court lay quiet and symmetrical once more. Poirot stepped into the waiting car, satisfied, The facts had been arranged, and harmony, at last, had been restored. The case is closed, but the next mystery is already waiting. This is unknown suspect.